Right, kia ora koutou, good morning everybody, and welcome to the Audit and Risk meeting this morning. Thank you all for your attendance. I understand Council has had a karakia this morning, so we won't be opening with a karakia. We'll move straight into the agenda for the day. There are no apologies. I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest on today's agenda.
Councillor Scott, for apology.
Sorry, Councillor Scott's not actually technically a committee member?
Just wanted to sit in on today.
Okay. No conflicts of interest on any items on the agenda today. Public forum, deputations and petitions, there are none at this point, and there has been no notice of any extraordinary or urgent business and no notices of motion. The minutes of the last committee meeting held on the 11th of December have been circulated. Do I have any questions or comments, please, on those minutes? Councillor Robinson moves. Councillor Ward seconds. All those in favour? All right, thank you. Carried. Okay, the first report, item 8, is a item for decision, which is a risk management update, including security. And I'd like to invite Curtis Morton and Grant McKenna to come and talk to the report, please.
Morning, folks. Yes, first one up. So I'm just going to intro this particular paper and then I'll pass to Curtis to talk about some of the depth of the paper that's there. But the main substantive item with this particular paper is our strategic risks. So we spent quite a bit of time drafting those strategic risks, and it is the start of the process, not the end of the process, just to make that clear. And what we're doing is looking for endorsement from the committee ahead of council approval in April. And we've also got an update on our risk activity plan, and that's essentially the things that we've been doing to improve risk management across the organisation. And lastly, we'll talk about security matters and our ethics reporting, which is also in that paper. So there's a few things there, and I'll pass to Curtis just to talk in more detail.
Thanks, Grant. Kia ora koutou. So as Grant's laid out, the substantive part of the paper is around seeking endorsement from the committee of the list of strategic risks which have been identified, and the councillors as part of the committee will be familiar. We sought some of your input into that process. The paper outlines the process that's been taken, including review with the executive leadership team and some refinement post that before it's been presented to you for endorsement today. As you can expect, when we've sought individual perspectives on strategic risks, we get a lot of data coming in, so we spent quite a bit of time actually refining and looking for the consistencies around where the strategic risks are. Most importantly, so that those risks can then be taken forward. They can be analysed, they can be assessed, but even more importantly, that we can put an appropriate management plan around those risks, so that you, as the Audit and Risk Committee, on behalf of the Council, have confidence that the strategic risks are being appropriately managed. So my perspective, our perspective through this process has been trying to identify not only what the risks are, but actually get to a point where we can properly analyse and put some plans around those as well. So the substantive part of the paper is seeking your endorsement for those risks to go through to Council in April. Following that endorsement, we'll begin working with the identified owners of those risks to complete those activities I've just talked about, to analyse, to assess those risks, to look at the controls that we have in place, to think about the things that we can and can't do to further manage that risk and put an appropriate management plan in place for each of those risks. Those risks, or these risks, will continue to be monitored, including through the Audit and Risk Committee, so you have oversight of the progress of the management plans associated with those risks, and recognising that, as we're all familiar at the moment, it's a dynamic environment, so we'll be continually, regularly reviewing those to ensure that they are still relevant and the right level of risk for the Council moving forward. The balance of the paper I'm happy to take as read and answer any questions that you have on it, as I believe the substantive piece is around the strategic risks and seeking your endorsement on those. So happy to close there, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
No, thank you for this, and I'm pleased it's sort of a work piece that's going forward as well. Just with regards to the strategic risk that you identified on page 20, with regards to governance, I think we need a real clear distinction between whether or not it is strategic risk or a behavioural risk, because I'm looking at what's coming at us as like centralised code of conduct, which also has the increased, I guess, ability for people to self-censor themselves. And so that changes decision making, the ability to talk about it, and those freedoms. So in that situation, it would be definitely strategic and behavioural. So going forward, I'm wondering if we could potentially tease out some of these alignments between things like the code of conduct and how that could actually have an undue ability for us to censor our decisions and not having the best ultimate decision for our communities, because it is feeling like that at times. So yeah, can we look at that, please, with the risk dynamics going forward?
Thank you for the question. And happy to. The short answer to the question is that will be there's a process by which we undertake that kind of review at that next step. So your specific example, I would describe as we would take each of these risks. If I took the governance risk as it's described, or when you finalise that, when we talk about analysing that risk, we are looking for controls that we have in place or the gaps that we've got in those controls. So an example would that be around what we have in the code of conduct, and we're looking to understand how is that currently managing the risk, or where is it potentially not managing the risk appropriately, and therefore what other potential strategies might we look to put in place. So without getting into the specifics of it, that is absolutely part of the next phase of analysing those risks.
To follow on from that, so there'll be like a defined mitigation plan that leads in from this. Is that right? Okay, thanks.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions on, particularly at this point in the paper, the strategic risks? Councillor Lamont.
Kia ora, thank you. Just two parts to this. In terms of the local government reform, you're saying it's such a dynamic environment with the shifting sands of time. How agile are we in our ability to keep adjusting when we don't know what's coming at us? It's the first part.
A very topical question at the moment, as you can expect. Look, the short answer is that this sits within our overall risk management framework. So this doesn't sit in isolation. And a key part of that framework is the process by which we have to review our profile regularly, particularly with our leadership team. So we have monthly agenda items where we are reviewing not only the work that's underway, but actually have we got the right mix and have we got the right focus. So from an ability to respond and be adaptive, yes, we have that. We're recognising that the process we're looking to put in place here is not a set and forget and should never be a set and forget.
Sorry, in supplementary to that and to your point, can you just briefly talk me through the trigger process? You said it's dynamic and changing. What is the trigger? What makes you change or think? Are there specific triggers?
When we're talking at a strategic risk level in particular, because we also have quite a detailed operational risk process as well, the strategic risk level, those triggers can come in multiple different ways. So they can come through the scanning that is undertaken through our function in terms of the environment. It can come through feedback or insight that comes from either executive team or through elected members as well, because we get feedback from yourself as well. All of that is constantly kind of assessed and triaged, and we use a number of our mechanisms within that framework that I described to understand, is this a material shift in our profile, and therefore what do we need to be doing about it?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you. So just trying to get my head around the scope of these risks, looking at, it says that they're about the council's strategic direction and objectives. They mostly look like they're risks to the organisation, the business, rather than to Canterbury per se, like the business, business and environment of Canterbury. Although it has got the And so I thought, okay, I understand the context, but then it's got the weather events thing in there, which is sort of starting to come into the on the ground. So I'm just trying to get my head around. I mean, I'm sure we could propose things that are risks to Canterbury, but that's not the context for this exercise. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it can all depend, of course, but my view here is it's anything that could affect Environment Canterbury's strategic direction. So it's the big ticket stuff that could throw us off course, and it does start to get into all sorts of interesting areas with climate change or geopolitical governance, but it's got to be at that right strategic level to have that kind of impact.
Yeah, okay. Well, I might might have some more suggestions then for the next round, because like you said, it's the beginning of the process, so not the end, so there'll be an opportunity to put more forward. But, yeah.
Giles?
Just add to what Grant said. This is just one element of our of the risk framework. There's a lot of work going on around operational risks to the core services that will flow through other reporting, particularly to the Regional Delivery Committee, and also is reviewed at on a regular basis by ELT, and will be periodically reported to this committee. So whilst we're talking about the strategic risks here, then they don't sit in isolation of other risk management mechanisms in the organisation.
Yes, so there'll be a place for risks to outcomes. There'll be a place for risks to outcomes somewhere else in a different table. Okay.
Yeah, certainly there'll be, as Giles just described, there's a certain sort of another layer, if you like, of the operational risks that have also been identified and are also being managed separate. Potentially, I think, to your point around some of these that are very much that strategic organisation-wide level, if that makes sense. And there will be visibility on these other risks and the risk management of those coming through this committee. Yeah.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the paper. I think that I'm comfortable it captures the high-level risks that would challenge the capacity of the organisation to discharge its role and function. And I note the dynamic nature of the environment. I'm always less focused on the particular words at any one time because it's really the conversations that it generates and the nature of the monitoring. I do wonder if in the context that we're operating now, it would be useful to be really explicit about the threshold between a risk and an issue, because some of these may well become issues, and it doesn't mean they fall off the agenda, but it does mean they have a different status and are managed in a different way. So that would be my only thought about some of these and the pace at which things around them might change, that you could find yourself moving from having a risk to having an issue.
Yeah, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you for the input. It's a core part of when we think about our risk management approach, the differentiation issue and risk. The thing I would add there is what we may see is that some of these risks do turn in part into issues, but there's still an element of risk associated, because whilst something may materialise, become an issue today, there's still a potential future uncertainty associated. So we talk about dynamic. It may not be that the risk itself disappears, but actually it changes. The nature of that risk changes.
I think that was really my point, that it will help particular councillors understand the status of the thing that you're managing, and perhaps avoid needing to constantly be passing wording when essentially you're in a particular ballpark, and the status and nature of it might change from time to time as to what you're actually having to respond to.
And I would say in relation to the local government reform, for example, we do have an intention to talk about that later under the Chair's report part. The Chief Executive is going to come and talk to that specific issue, because it is actually an issue, but it's deriving a whole lot of risks for the organisation. So it's a very good example of exactly what you're saying, Carolyn, around, it is a risk, it needs to start in the risk register, but actually it's also a live issue per se, which has had some matters that are being dealt with directly, and we'll pick that up when we get to it. I think I saw another hand up, potentially Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just with regards to page 24 and the ethics reporting, I just would like some identification or clarity with regards to how council-related issues or complaints are dealt with and reported on, because we're talking about staff reporting or instances of unethical behaviour or protect disclosures and the likes, what happens when, I guess, a governance member does the same, or how is that triaged or put into the right place and reported on? Could you walk me through that?
So thank you for the question. So as you point out, the reporting that we have in here is related to staff, reports from staff related to unethical behaviour or conduct. My comment here is that if the matter is related to something that sits within the Code of Conduct, as you're aware, there is a formal complaints process and procedure in place around that. So notified to the Chief Executive through to the Chair. So there's a process already in place around that. We don't report on those within this report. If the matter was to do with a more of an operational or management related matter, again, in the first instance through to the Chief Executive, and there'd be a process to manage that. We don't capture the reporting of those instances within this, within the audit and risk paper as it stands.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions at all on this part of the agenda? Particularly, I'm conscious we've spent some time talking about the strategic risks. Does anyone have any further comments on progress made in implementing the organisation's risk activity plan, or also the related security matters and ethics reporting? Anything else on those two topics? Sorry, Councillor Ward.
I was just going to say, if there's no further questions, I'd like to move the adoption of this paper.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Ward has moved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Thank you. Carried. Okay, we will now move to item 9, which is the start of reporting of items for information, and we start with the Audit and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report, and Grant is going to talk to this. No, Giles is going to talk to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see there's 2 actions, both are complete. The only point I'd raise is that a lot of further work has been done, particularly on the procurement policy, and that is included again in the pack for any further feedback before it goes to the Chief Exec for formal approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion on either of those 2 items? If not, can I have someone please move that we note those status update report? Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lamont. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. 9.2, the committee work plan and policy status update. Grant, is Curtis going to come back to this, or are you going to do that? Grant, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so in this paper, we're providing an update on the work plan, which is looking out to the next 3 meetings. So these are the things that we provide at the meetings. That's the work plan. It's fairly straightforward, 1-pager. We also got a list of our various policies and where those policies are at. I think we can take those papers as read and answer any questions you might have on it. But the more substantive item is really the policies that we're putting up through this paper. So we've got 3 policies which are essentially being renewed. The fraud policy, sensitive expenditure, and the significantly redrafted procurement policy from that seen last meeting. So what we're doing here is we're seeking committee feedback ahead of socialising these with staff and getting sign-off from our Chief Executive. So before I go too much further, Chair, do you want me to give a little snippet of each of the policies in terms of what they're about, or and take questions after that, or just go through them step by step?
Yeah, I think we might just stop for a second, just check no one has any questions on the work plan, just to clear that piece up.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Yes, and I think if you could maybe just a quick overview of the policies, any particular notable changes to them, and then I'll open for discussion.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
So first of all, the fraud policy, that's now split into 2 documents. So we've got the policy itself and we've got the guidelines. So it's quite clear for each. The substance of the fraud policy hasn't changed, but we have made effort to better word things and to be more definitive with our meaning. And so a good example of that is associated person, for example, as a definition. and that's really those who are one step removed from those of us at ECAN. And those are really, we're needing people at ECAN, whoever they are, whatever position they hold, to actually make sure that they notify associated persons, because how else would they know that we have this policy and it exists? So that's quite a much clearer definition. In terms of sensitive expenditure, this has been quite a big step forward to sweep up a number of policies. So we've swept up the hospitality and the business and travel expenses, for example, into one, and being really clear about our overarching policy versus our guidance, which is a separate document, which is much more detailed and helps staff to ultimately comply. There's a lot of different elements in sensitive expenditure, so it's got to be really clear. So I think it achieves that with the separation. We've also ensured alignment with the Office of the Auditor General's good practice and guidance on sensitive expenditure. And just our luck, they happened to renew it just last month as well. So we had to go back and recheck and make sure we're still in alignment. But the good news is that we're still fully in line with what the OAG are looking for, which is great news. Lastly, the procurement policy. Now that's been significantly overhauled from last meeting based on the feedback that we received. We got some really good feedback on this. And it's now much more pragmatic. We're making it clearer for staff to make good procurement decisions, including value for money as a key driver. And part of that too is being really clear about the legal and policy framework that we work within, because it is really significant when it comes to procurement. We've also rolled through the procurement rules from MB and the guidance from NZTA as well. It was there before, but we've just carried that through. And lastly, we've got improved integration with our Te Tiriti o Waitangi principles and our obligations when it comes to partnership that we've worked through with Tumu Heranga, our internal team as well. They are happy with the way this has been presented, which is really important given our relationship with Ngāi Tahu. And I'll just finish there and pass back to the Chair.
Thank you, Grant. And look, I'll just say from the Chair, I'm really delighted to see the quality of these policies, but also the guidelines that go with them. Quite often you see policies developed and they're a mix of policy and guideline, and they're very hard for people to actually implement the policy or adhere to the policy because there's a lack of clarity sometimes around what the policy is actually trying to achieve. I think what the work that's gone in here has done is allow us to have a very clear policy set, but then importantly some guidelines that go with that with a bit more detail and a bit more examples for people to really understand how they can then comply or ensure they're complying with the policy. And that's a really important part of the framework. So well done to you and the team. And I know particularly in the procurement space, thank you, Carolyn, and others that have fed back into that policy, because it's a very comprehensive policy, but it does again provide, I think, pretty good guidance for ensuring that if we adhere to that policy, we will be in following best practice as required, particularly at the moment in the public sector space. Just an opening comment. Thank you. Councillor Lamont.
I think I know the answer to this, but it would be give a degree of comfort to hear it from your dulcet tones. So, how is compliance assured? First part, I've got a supplementary.
Yeah, how is compliance assured? I mean, it is really important. It's not just the policy in paper, it's actually what people do in practice. And I think there's a number of levels to that. Firstly, the people that we employ, the culture that we have. Those things for me are the really fundamental aspects. And then it's making sure that people understand the policy. So that's our induction and our training and all the things that we do to keep it current for people to actually comply in the first place. Sorry.
The second part, what is the process for actioning breaches? Can you just touch on that?
It depends on the nature of the breach, ultimately, and the seriousness of it. So we've got our escalation process. We've got our fraud policy, which is in the mix here. It may come by way of protected disclosures or some other form. We've got a really clear process for that, and being careful to make sure we understand the facts of what's occurred and we don't launch into an investigation, for example. It's a really formal process and a very steady approach to that.
Thank you. And I'm assuming the first question too, the internal audit program will also pick up compliance and checking of compliance with these new policies as they are implemented.
We've got our assurance program, and we don't specifically have policies as one of those elements in the next quarters to look at. So, but what I would say is Audit New Zealand look at these extensively, our compliance with policies, and I'd expect that internal audit would also look at these in terms of the other categories that they're doing. So if they're doing procurement, they'll look at the procurement policy and at that level,
Yeah, and certainly to Councillor's question, they'll check compliance with the policy as part of that internal audit process. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Sunkel.
You asked my question for me as I was going to be what tests will we then put in place for the policies to ensure that we do have compliance. And we've basically answered that question.
Thank you. I'm not sure which one of you, so I'll go Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Moody.
Yeah, hi. Hi. Hello. I can't find it. Have we removed the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 from our procurement policy? The Israeli illegal occupation, has it been removed?
It is still in there. I'll find it. It's definitely still in there. Yeah.
Okay, we'll look for that. Yeah, we'll check that for you now. Thank you.
So Curtis has just mentioned page 88. Alex.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, very much. Yeah. Well done. Thank you, Curtis. Councillor Moody.
Thank you. So just as per the run through for this meeting, circling back to the gifts, which we discussed the last audit and risk. So I can see page 57 said gifts are covered in the managing conflict of interest policy, but that's like a hyperlink on my piece of paper. Has there been any change? I know it was being reviewed between the last meeting and this one, I think.
Right.
Sorry. Yep. Yeah, so it is under review at the moment, and it is covered, as you say, on page 57. It does cover that conflicts of interest policy, gifts, donations, and koha, and we've got a specialist koha policy as well, because that's quite unique, and it's currently under review.
Okay, so it might be the next meeting that we find out if the organisation's taken any moves to remove that perceived conflict by eliminating or reducing the gift's monetary value limit. Is that right? We'll find out next time maybe?
Yes, we'll keep committee updated on the progress of that. It's with the legal team to progress and finalise it.
I think the conversation, if I recall at the last committee, the monetary value for declaring gifts or the offer of gifts is currently $50, but quite rightly the committee highlighted that it's not just monetary value that's important, it's also the optics and the situation that people need to bear in mind.
Yeah,
so $50 is a starting conversation, but people should be acutely aware either accepting but declaring or declining.
I'm glad you agree that 50 seems like a good starting point, because I don't believe that's correct. I proposed it become 50, but because it was currently around 300, and so if 50, if you're saying 50 sounds good, then I'm pleased to hear that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think he was trying to
Current guidance is if a gift of more than $50 needs to be put into the Gifts and Hospitality Register.
But you can still accept gifts that are above that, and that's the point I was making, was just propose them, we just don't accept them, and then if they're
So for staff, the process normally is that if you are offered a gift then you discuss it with your senior manager or director or the chief executive as appropriate about whether it is appropriate to accept it. Often gifts can be perishable or can be shared amongst staff, which make them less. So there's a number of factors to take into account, but the acceptance of gifts has to be, you'll note in the register, is approved by relevant individual.
Councillor Robinson, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to clarify the discussion at the time was about there's monetary version and then there's also just a visual version, because something might be very little in monetary value but actually significant in just passing hands. So yeah, that's
That will be considered, from what I'm understanding, Grant, that's being considered as part of the review of the policy.
That's correct. So the nature of it, the amount of it, whether it's accepted or declined, they're all factors.
Yeah.
Factors, yeah.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I start just by endorsing the Chair's comments. I think this is a really good package, and I really liked the breakdown of the high-level strategic why are we doing this, and then the more operational guidelines of how do we do this. So I think there's a lot of work gone into this, and I was I'm the kind of person who enjoyed reading it. It was so, to be commended, because I know it just doesn't happen, and I particularly liked the new version of the procurement policy. I just have a couple of comments that are a more detailed layer. In terms of the fraud policy, I wondered if it was worth thinking about, maybe at the guideline level, something that refers to communications, that the nature of investigations may well be that there is obviously a concern to keep them relatively confidential, but it's also likely that in some circumstances the event that triggered the investigation or the issue in itself could be public, and some guidance as to how to manage internal and external comms, which might also be an opportunity to reference the OIA implications, that these sorts of things can often cascade, and they're difficult to try and navigate at the time without having given people guidance. And the best way to manage an OIA is when something starts, not when you get the request. So I just wondered if there was some benefit in looking at having something that addressed when and how you would communicate, who might be able to comment, the different kinds of communication thresholds, if something's referred to an external entity for investigation, those sorts of things. My other comment, and Stephanie, please, this is just me being someone who thinks about all the possibilities, and it's not intended to be anything other than the realm of possible. But the policy is explicit on a number of occasions that decisions are taken either by the chief executive or a named second-tier manager, and that's appropriate given the nature of the decisions. Policy is silent if either of those entities is the subject of the complaint or the issue. That's a difficult issue to navigate at the time it happens. I'm not saying it would or could, but it has happened in other organisations. And I just wonder if it might be prudent to have something in the policy that provides a roadmap as to what the alternative decision-making path would be in the event that any of the named entities was actually the focus of the investigation. And my other comment in relation to the fraud policy is I'm not aware of the nature of your public policy, public liability insurance, but if there is potential cover for those events, the policy might prudently prompt people to notify the insurer in a timely way to ensure that whatever cover you've got is like, I don't know whether you've got potential cover, but usually if you have, there's a requirement of early notification, and one of the ways you can get derailed by insurers is arguing about when it was possible for you to have notified them of a potential claim. So that would just be... I've got comments on the other two if you want me to just...
Yeah, well, yes,
Okay.
and except any responses on any of that, I think they're excellent points, by the way. But is there any responses on those points before we go on to the next policies?
Just wanted to say thank you, Carolyn, for your feedback. It's been really good. It's helped us a lot. And yeah, I think they're all valid points. You're not always in control of communication and how it happens, so you need to prepare right. And also, the sooner you can declare with insurance companies, the better. And we do have a variety of insurance policies that would dive into this area. Yeah.
I think that in relation to the comms piece, actually, even in the sensitive sensitive expenditure area, which also at times can have some public implications, it's probably useful that that policy also has a reference to the communications process and plan, should issues arise in that regard. Again, it's an area that often gets particular media attention, etc. So I think fraud's a great one as well, but also sensitive expenditure. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Carolyn. Just to support your, particularly your first point, at sea and directors and so on. Unfortunately, none of us are perfect, so good to have these things spelled out beforehand, so everyone knows the processes here.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Just 2 points on sensitive expenditure policy, and again, at a relatively detailed level, because overall I thought it was, again, comprehensive and a user-friendly document, so I thought had gone into that. My one thought was, in terms of page 58, where it lists criteria when looking at good decision-making, there's nothing in those criteria that specifically focuses on quantum, and I wondered if there was value in importing language from a part of page 74 of your document, which relates to the social club, which requires expenditure is prudent and reasonable relative to the benefits accrued. It's entirely possible that you could meet all of the criteria in relation to expenditure and the quantum itself be excessive and tip it over into sensitive. So I just wondered about that introduction, importing the language from your social club to have an additional criteria that highlighted that there is an affirmative obligation to essentially keep the expenditure at a prudent level necessary to achieve the benefit. And as I read through the document, I found language that I thought, okay, that would work there. My other comment is more substantive in that you have a definition of a conflict of interest on page 60. My concern is I think that's quite a narrow characterisation of a conflict, in that it specifically requires the conflict to relate to an individual with decision-making rights, when I think what would perhaps be a better focus is, rather than a decision-maker, be on the decision-making process, because a number of you, particularly, are not decision-makers, but you may be perceived as having influence on a decision-making process of a kind that should fall within a conflict of interest. So I wondered if the language could be expanded so that it talked about personal interests, relationships or activities that could compromise or be perceived to compromise the integrity of or trust and confidence in the decision-making processes of Environment Canterbury, rather than being explicit to a decision-maker.
Any comments on those? Sorry, Councillor Sunkel.
Sorry, you know my predilection for drafting in advance.
Very
So
helpful.
that rather than a focus on being a decision maker, it would read personal interests, relationships or activities that could compromise or be perceived to compromise, this is the change, the integrity of or trust and confidence in the decision-making processes of Environment Canterbury.
Yeah, so it pulls out just the decision-making piece and makes it more about how that could impact on the process, because people, as Karen said, could be involved in the process that aren't actually technically the decision-makers, but they've been involved in the process which provides information, for example, to the decision-makers.
Thank you, and I can sort of see downstream effects of policy or decision affecting people down the line and go, oh, I don't really want to. Yeah, so there's... Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and often in procurement processes, actually, it is the management team and others who are actually doing all the work to get the information provided to the decision makers to make the decision on the procurement. So it's a very valid point.
I've got the language here.
Okay. Any further comments on that? I do. Councillor Mackenzie has asked for leave to make a comment. I'm happy to give you such leave, Councillor.
More to ask a question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
You may.
And that is on page 86 and 87, where you're talking about embedding mana whenua partnership and procurement. The policy talks about early engagement, co-design, and all that's good. I guess my question is really, when you get down to working with encouraging Maori and local-based suppliers, and how you try to ensure division between the planning and the co-design, and then the delivery between mana whenua entities, when in fact quite often it's the same people. So if I take the case of down our way, if you're dealing with Ara whenua on co-design, and then the implementation, and you cite the example of river improvements, is native plantings, and the same people who at Ara whenua run the nursery, and that's part of the procurement policy. How do we ensure there is a division, a legitimate division between, and I've read the policy and I'm not convinced that it necessarily does give us clear division between the co-design and then the procurement.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think that there is a potential for conflict or a perceived conflict of interest there, potentially. Grant, what was any thought in that in the drafting of the policy?
Yeah, my mind's just turning to Appendix A at the back of the procurement policy, and it talks about the different levels and the scale of expenditure, and you need to be quite clear about your conflicts of interest throughout procurement. And I guess that's where that could potentially come up. The differences between design and delivery need to be really overt and clear about that, and who the parties are that are involved. I think that is a critical part of the procurement piece.
Yes, I think it's a very good point, Councillor. It would need to be well documented how that process was handled in any given procurement individual process, because there will be some cases where you did right. The most obvious provider of the service is actually the mana whenua that you're talking to help guide the development of the process. Sorry, I'll get Giles make a comment and then I'll go, Councillor.
Really valid point. I think it is the application is far wider than just working with mana whenua. There are regularly occasions when you are looking for some external expertise to help you shape what the procurement might look like, and how do you keep all parties safe in terms of either precluding them from submitting a proposal or structuring it so that they can, with all good conscience, submit a proposal. And there are various ways that can be done, both with mana whenua and also with other parties.
Yeah, the reality is we do sometimes fish in very small ponds, don't we, where the same people are involved in a number of ways with different things, and it can be a difficult thing to manage. So I think an understanding of how we might just call that out a little bit in the policy would be useful, even if it's just a reiteration of we acknowledge that can at times be something which needs to be considered. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Going back to the conflicts of interest that Carolyn just mentioned before, does it direct, is there a trigger in there that would direct one back to a register of interests of all personnel, all officers in this process? Like, is there an active register of interests for all staff?
Giles, do you want to respond to that, please?
Also, every procurement exercise should include a stage of people declaring their interests, relevant interests, before the procurement process starts specifically. And I know that I believe General Counsel is working on the conflicts of interest policy, which will include a requirement for ongoing declarations from certain staff, if not all.
Reason being, I don't think it just applies to procurement, though. I think it applies to everything. Yeah.
It does apply to everything. All I was trying to highlight, Councillor, was that there is an additional step for procurement where you are expected for that specific piece of work, but the declaring of conflicts of interest is a matter through the conflicts of interest policy, which Robin is currently reviewing.
Excellent, thank you. Grant, did you want to comment further?
I was just going to say there's a related piece there too, with new employees starting in the organisation and declaring your interests, as opposed to a conflict of interest. What are these things you're interested in that may relate? So it's another piece of it, who we employ and what they declare.
Okay. Councillor Moody?
Yeah, and of course, embedding a process where that's reviewed regularly and every year or whatever, people refill out their conflicts, as you have in other policies, which is good to see, that it's not a set and forget thing. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, is there any further discussion then on the, we'll talk about the work plan, the council and corporate policies, and we have provided feedback on fraud, sensitive expenditure and procurement. Is there any further discussion on this matter 9.2? No? Okay, Councillor Sunkle's happy to move. Councillor Ward's happy to second, please, that the committee endorses the Forward Committee work plan, endorses the status of the council and corporate policies, and we have provided feedback on the draft policies. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? All right. Anyone against? Thank you. Carried. Good discussion, and thank you for the work that's gone into those. They are important documents for the organisation, so thank you for the work that's gone into those and for the feedback from everyone. 9.3, the annual tax update. Grant, you happy to talk to that?
So tax is a very exciting topic, doesn't it? So everyone's keen to hear about this one. Yes, good. So what we've got here is a summary of responses in relation to key tax questions each year that helps the committee gain assurance that our tax affairs are in order. That's what this paper is looking to do. It's asking some good questions. We can take the paper as read. There's no significant issues in there. It's very much a case of updating it annually. But I would like to note that we've just completed a GST review with Ernst & Young, and it was a very positive result. Management have got the report at the moment, but we need to consider and give feedback, and we will get that to the committee once we've got that feedback in there. But there's nothing significant, no high-risk items with that GST review. In most cases, it's really referring to housekeeping matters and tidying up our documentation a bit, which I think is a positive thing to do, but it's really just a step forward on what we already have. They have noted that our GST processes and systems are significantly improved and effective, which is good. And as I say, we'll bring the full report to the committee meeting in June to let people have a look at that and give comment. And that's pretty much that one.
Thank you. Councillor Sunkel.
Just a comment, thank you for that. In a previous life, it was the feedback loop, the final piece of assurance to ensure that things are happening rather than just the policies in place and accepting. So yeah, pleased to see that we are continuing that work of assurance and testing our systems and the result that we're seeing. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Look, it might not be the most interesting topic, but actually tax compliance is a very important piece of legislative compliance for the organisation. So it's actually good to have the assurance that we are actually compliant in those regards. It's very easy to not be compliant. So I think it's very useful. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that as well. I think it's always good to be on the right side of the ledger, especially when it comes to things like GST and tax implications. It's not a good look for an organisation like ours to be doing things wrong.
Right. Okay, any further discussion then on that tax update? No? If not, can I have someone move, please, that we receive, I'll go back to that, get it right, notes the tax status report and notes a report on the review of GST by Ernst & Young is currently being undertaken and will be provided on completion. Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Robinson, all those in favour? All right, anyone against? Thank you, carried. Okay, we're moving through the agenda very efficiently. Thank you. Let's get into 9.4, the sensitive expenditure report. And while you're still sitting there, Grant, carry on.
Yes, a full-time job today, Chair, so that's good. Yes, the sensitive expenditure report. So this is the first time through with this report. And what we're looking to do is share it with you. It's not perfect at this stage, but what we're doing is putting out a better report that's, I hope, more useful and better aligned with our new sensitive expenditure policy than what we've had in the past. And we can really improve this over time based on the feedback that we get. There are some areas that need further explaining, as we've explained in the report itself, and that's really in the case where there's been a bit of overspending for the likes of catering and room hire and travel and accommodation. But that's really down to budget phasing. That will balance out by the end of the year. It's really just a case of that phasing and timing with those particular spend areas. We may also consider separating out catering and room hire as different accounts. At the moment, they're they're combined and consolidated. That's why we needed to make it clear that it was both of those types of spend. But other than that, there's nothing significant in here to report. Happy to take questions and feedback about improvements from here.
Thank you. And I'll just endorse again, I think it's excellent to start getting some reporting on this. It's good to have visibility at this committee of the expenditure of this nature, and it does give the opportunity for councillors to really get some familiarity with the spend in those areas and the particular suppliers that are being used, etc. And that does allow a nice watchdog, I think, on just making sure that people are comfortable with the level of expenditure and understand why we would be spending money in some of these areas. And certainly, again, when you reference back to the OAG and our auditors from Audit New Zealand, sensitive expenditure, as we know, is something they are specifically asked to look at, and they also have an expectation that actually governance is looking at it. So this is a good opportunity for us to demonstrate to our auditors that actually we take sensitive expenditure seriously and we have policies about it, which we've just discussed, and we also monitor and measure how that spend is occurring. So I think it's a very good addition to our overall review of what is an important part of the organisation's spend, albeit some people think things like catering and travel aren't necessarily important. They are areas in the public sector that get a lot of attention. Any questions on this? Councillor Moody.
Thanks, Grant. Yes, it's good to see this extra reporting. Appreciate it. So page 100, that first graph, which you were speaking to, expenditure year over year analysis versus budget. So you're talking about the phasing. Does that mean we would expect to see or hope to see that green line, which is currently sort of jumped up above the budget, kind of come down, maybe dip below, and end up averaging out closer to the budgeted expenditure by the end of the year?
Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly what it is. It will balance out by year end. We're running ahead at the moment, unlike some other areas where we're running behind our budget. So this is a bit of an exception.
Okay, welcome, Chair Swiggs. Anyone else have it? Councillor Lamont.
How do we keep an eye on redundancy expenditure? It's sort of not so much a budgeted item. Could be, there could be relevancy. How do we keep an eye on it?
Yeah, that's a very unique area of spend, and how we keep an eye on it is largely as a result of the initiatives that might take place. So something may kick off where we need to do a realignment. We'd be working with our people safety and wellbeing team to articulate what that work is and what the costs might be, because it's not just the one-off costs like redundancy, it's also the ongoing implications. So it's a case of getting, I'll just shorthand this, HR and finance working really closely together to make sure there's a budget set up and it's monitored and managed.
Thank you. Any further discussion then on the sensitive expenditure report for the period 1 July to 31 December? Councillor Sunkel.
Just a question on the credit card statistics and the fraudulent transaction noted. I'm just, without detail, is it a genuine fraudulent event, or is it somewhere where the wrong purchases were made or a receipt not produced? How do we define fraudulent in that space?
In this case, this particular fraudulent event, it wasn't down to staff committing fraud as such. It's more an external actor using a credit card to purchase something that shouldn't have been purchased, and that was caught on to quite early, and the card was shut down. The costs were reimbursed from ASB. So it's more of an external driver in that case, yeah.
Yeah, that might be something, just to note going forward, when we have a note of a fraud, if we indicate there's a fraud's occurred, it's probably useful just to note what that was. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Robinson.
It's a pretty sort of basic question, but with regards to conference fees, there's a zero in that area for expenditure. But I guess, I've been to conferences where there's a number of staff at those conferences, and I'm wondering how that might be, if it's an uplift in their educational thing, or how else could that be listed within expenditure if it's not in the conference? So, Do you know what I mean? Because there might be I can understand if there's a guest speaker, but when there's a lot of staff there clearly participating, as I would, I'm wondering how that might be listed. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in that case it's a good question because it is a standout because there's no cost there, and I think that might be a coding issue. It may be hidden somewhere else like training and things like this, but we can take it away and just double check. Yeah.
I think just to add to what Grant said, as Grant mentioned, there are a number of areas where the way in which we've structured our coding could be improved. We have obviously the FMIS project, which gives us an opportunity to do that. Without going, without looking through the detail, a lot of our conference fees are charged to learning and development, so we need to work out how do we separately analyse those, recognising the cost benefit of doing so. We've tried to align this very much to the Auditor General's guidance on areas of sensitive expenditure, noting that there are many other areas that potentially also need monitoring through other mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that away going forward. Is there any further discussion then on the sensitive expenditure report? Otherwise, could I have someone move, please, that the committee receives the report on sensitive expenditure for the period 1 July 25 to 31 December 25? Thank you, Councillor Lamont. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Those in favour? All right, anyone against? Thank you, carried. 9.5, assurance update. Curtis, I think, is going to come and join Grant at the table. He's getting lonely up there all by himself, Curtis. Welcome to present the update, and I'm happy for the two of you, please, to talk us through the paper.
Yes, pleased to have a friend join me. Thank you, Curtis. So Curtis will provide a bit of an update on recent assurance activity with this paper carried out across the organisation, and we'll also discuss the appointment of our new external provider of internal audit services, which will be quite interesting. We can't say who that is just yet, but we can give some other information. And the new provider will deliver the assurance plan agreed last meeting. Pass to Curtis.
Thanks, Grant. I'll try to keep up with the dulcet tones flow. So, look, it's a short update paper, and I'm happy to take it as read and answer any questions that the committee has. I thought it might be useful just to add a little bit of extra commentary around it, because I think some of the conversation today has and the topics today have highlighted the value of not just internal audit but also assurance, and to see how the broader assurance framework, because we've talked about it somewhat conceptually the last couple of meetings, how it actually plays out. So you've seen today through the GST review an example of assurance activity which happens in the organisation, which is not specifically part of the internal audit program, but is designed to give you, as the committee and the council, assurance around some of our core processes. We also talked quite a bit about policies, and there was some commentary around how do we get that assurance around compliance with policies. So internal audit is one of those mechanisms by which we can seek that. And so you may recall on the forward program, we have a sensitive expenditure internal audit planned, for example. Given we're just reviewing a policy, putting that in place, there is guidelines and procedures around that. There's a timely opportunity to seek assurance around the effectiveness of policy compliance and the controls that we have in place. So we can see some of these things coming together within the internal audit scope, but also part of that broader assurance framework. To the paper itself, a couple of things to highlight. One is that it's pleasing to see that almost all of the previous high-rated findings in the assurance management actions have been completed. There is one outstanding, which has been covered in multiple items to date already. And then the other piece of note within the paper is around the internal audit service provider. So we have completed a tendering process for that. We have identified a preferred supplier to undertake for a 3-year period to undertake the internal audits for us on our behalf or alongside us. We are working through contracting with that service provider, but we anticipate that will be in place by the end of the month, because the agreement is due to take place from the 1st of April. And so looking forward, the focus for the rest of the financial year and what the committee should be looking to see is that we commence our first internal audit with that service provider in the final quarter. But also, and as we pointed out at the last committee meeting, we'll take another look at the internal audit rolling plan again, recognising that things change. So with that provider on board is also a timely opportunity to get some more of that insight into ensure that the plan we put forward to you at the next meeting in June for the following year is in the right area. It is fully risk-based, and it is appropriate for what we are leaning into in the next 12 months. So happy to pause there, answer any questions the committee may have.
Great, thank you. And it's good to hear that procurement process is well underway. As you say, the intention is to have them up and running from April, which should be good, and have them come actually to our next meeting. Any questions then on the update that we have there? You'll see the recent assurance activity reports, as we've talked about, the Holidays Act remediation, obviously we've had GST. You've had the update on the procurement process for the external provider. Does anyone have any further comments or questions? Gee, Curtis, you come to the table and don't get any questions. Or old Grant's getting questions left, right and centre and you get none.
I'll leave them for Grant.
Okay. Well, if that being the case, if someone could please move that we note the update on assurance activity and the assurance management action summary update, and note the update on appointment of the internal auditor will be provided next meeting. Thank you, Councillor Moody. Seconded, Councillor Robinson. Those in favour? All right, thank you. Carried. Okay, 9.6, very important, health and safety and wellbeing update. Kirsty, I think, is going to come and join, please. Welcome. Happy to take the report as read, of course, but also happy for you, please, just to talk through key points and anything else you might want to raise.
Kia ora, good morning. Yes, please take the paper as read. A couple of salient points in there. We are continuing to work on our HN 591 bird flu response. So that has and is ongoing in the business in terms of how we prepare for the eventuality of that coming. We're also we've gone out to the relevant sections that will be more exposed to that in terms of the work that they undertake in the field to ensure that we have the appropriate PPE in stock and inside those environments, so staff can access it should it happen immediately. Just looking at the other relevant piece, which I think is important, is that the Health and Safety app now has 2 site observation tools. We did speak of this. I know Councillor Robinson is very keen to come out. So that we can do some internal assurance with our staff and also do external assurance with our contractors. So just to give you a wee update on that as well, we are looking at a different type of app. We are in discussions at the moment, so I will be bringing an update to that. The app works for us as it stands, but we would like better efficiency and better coverage for that app in the future. So we're talking with Digital Solutions about that.
Sorry, do you have a comment now, Councillor Robinson?
Yes.
Yeah, no. If it's pertinent to that topic, I'm happy for you to ask now, please.
It may lead to a question, but it's more of a comment in the use of that tool. I had to use it recently. Didn't work for a councillor. Okay, I can give you feedback on that, and I have done, but I think making it into something even better would be amazing. So yeah, I'm watching the space. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol.
I'll just respond to that as well. So last year I came to you after a discussion with my team, and I thought that we would be able to provide you with that app, but due to security reasons and risk reasons, we weren't able to give access to that. So there is a standard process for councillors to be able to report any incidents through to governance, and then they will load it internally into our system. That is how it works now. That is why the app didn't work for you. Yeah. So that was discussed with governance last year. We did prepare some induction material for you, and then realised that after talking with Digital Solutions, we couldn't give you access to to the internal part of the system that would allow you to use that app. So part of the reason for looking at a new app is to be able to have discussions with the technical digital people to see if we can actually ensure that you do have that. But be assured, as soon as you reported it, I got to see it and we dealt with it appropriately. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Lamont.
Further to Councillor Robinson's comment, in my other life, I come across this a lot. My question is around the app's usage. Do you have 100% uptake? Because with hundreds of individuals in an organisation, some are early adopters and some are not. And how do you monitor that? And what training do staff have on the app? Third part of the question is, within the app, are there sort of triggers at various points depending on what's being reported for sort of further investigation?
Happy to answer that question. So there's been extensive training for staff throughout the last 12 months. I've been here for 12 months. So throughout the 12 months that I've been here, there has been extensive opportunities to learn about the use of the app. It goes out regularly through our internal communications, and it's also presented at our induction for all of kaimahi that come into the business, regardless of where they stand in the business, whether they're a manager or a staff member. So it's discussed there. The links are continually promoted. My staff meet across the business every month with all of the groups, and we are continually promoting uptake. We know that the majority of the staff have picked up that app. Obviously, there are some people, when we have staff who sit in the building all the time or in our buildings all the time. The reality is that they can actually do that across our organisational intranet system, so they can just put it in through their computer. How do I know about it? I get it as soon as you land it. I get it, and we're just working with our digital solutions area to improve access for our directors. So as soon as it lands, the director will know if it's relevant to their part of the business. Direct managers at the moment know, and managers above them. So we've put that step in so that the director will know as well. And it actually flashes up as soon as it hits the computer, and then we access it. And depending on the severity of it, I mean, there's a process to go through, the investigation process, but I see every single one. So regardless of whether I'm at work or not. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments in relation to the health, safety and wellbeing update? Well, can we go another place? I'll go Councillor Moody and then I'll come to Chair Swiggs. Councillor Moody.
Thanks for the report and the information on the app. Obviously, the reporting here, October, November, December 25. You might not have this info to hand, but I'm curious, I guess, if we zoom out to, say, the last 5 years, do you have a feel for how our performance is going in this area? Is it getting better, worse, the same?
The last 5 years I can't comment on because I wasn't here, but looking back, our staff numbers have increased. We provide digital tools for staff to report information. There's a constant promotion of reporting to our staff from the directors, from our CE, and from a health and safety and wellbeing team. I can't comment on the last 5 years. What I have looked at, and I have been in the world of regional council for some time, what I have found is that it is comparative, month on month, year on year. It is a weird, I call it the Bermuda Triangle syndrome, where often the same amount of incidents will occur each quarter. I can't explain it. We do have subtle variances, but it is there. And before I came down to the meeting, I was looking at some wellbeing reporting. So I get the report for, say, February this year, and the same report I asked for February last year, and the numbers are almost identical, as are the issues. So that is, I call it the Bermuda issue, and it happened at the Regional Council in Hawke's Bay as well. So there is regular reporting, and there is regular requests for the importance of staff to report information, near miss and incident reporting.
Oh, thanks for the overview. Appreciate candid thoughts, and Godspeed in steering us out of the Bermuda Triangle and upwards into doing better.
Thank you, Councillor Sunkel.
Yes, just a question for me, key points number 2, page 107. And my question is, what we're developing a template for presentation to community groups on health and safety workshops for entities that take funding from us. My question is, what is our responsibility to those entities that sit outside of us in providing health and safety conversations alongside the money we give? I'm just wondering where our responsibility lies.
Thank you for that. I looked at this last year because of the phenomenal amount of grant funding that we give to communities. Under the legislation, we are required to look after volunteers as well as contractors, or ensure that volunteers and contractors, as well as our kaimahi, follow a process of determining risk and managing that risk. When I looked out, I saw that we gave away funding to community groups, but we weren't really asking them to consider and look at what their risks might be. So I had a discussion with Stephanie, and she was very passionate about the fact that we do have a responsibility for volunteers. In a lot of environments, and certainly probably in the private sector, people don't understand that, but we do. And we should care for them and provide context for them. So that's what we did. We engaged, and I was going to report on that in my next quarterly meeting, but I'll do that now because we've got it on the table. So we engaged an external contractor. We didn't want to give the advice ourselves and so be seen to be sort of constructing something that was unmanageable. We constructed a fabulous contractor who created tools and then ran an online session. We got 69 responses for that, and 32 volunteer groups attended that meeting. That information is now ongoing and is available on our website, so that community groups, when they move through the process, we ask for them to determine what the health and safety risk is, and we've given them the templates to be able to do that and provide that as part of their grant application.
Okay, good. Excellent. That's an excellent initiative. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
No, I just, as a user of that portal and having been here for, 3 and a bit years, I have seen an uplift, and I just wanted to give you that feedback. It's direct and it's pretty quick, and I just wanted to say you're in the right direction, and I look forward to the app.
Thank you. Chair Swiggs.
I was going to ask a question. How do you capture mental health?
So our provider, OCP, who is our EAP provider, they provide us with monthly updates, and then they give us a quarterly review, a 6-monthly review, and a 12-month review. That is my responsibility. I manage that, and so I'm aware in a lot of cases where people are needing to seek support. It is a confidential service, but we get regular reporting, which is how I was able to report to you this morning about the February documents. And I keep abreast of that every month when I get that report to ensure and see if there's any sort of large spikes, but there haven't appeared to be.
And does that get reported back through here somewhere or somewhere else, like a high-level overview? I mean, this is more sort of like a lot of physical risk, but there's a big risk, especially what I'm thinking is we're going to go through an immense amount of change at the moment, and it'd be useful to understand if there's any pressure points that we need to be focusing on as governors.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we have been looking at is changing the way in which we report the graphs. So we've been working with our digital solutions people to improve our incident reporting program, and we're including into that psychosocial risks. My intention is that perhaps by the June report, the reporting will look quite different, and it will include that.
Excellent, thank you. Any fits, Councillor Lamont?
Further to Councillor Sunkel's question and your excellent response, it just occurred to me that it would be quite a good idea, being the policy and strategy geek amongst us, that we have a formal policy around the work that we're doing in terms of the community health and safety workshops. It's sort of belts and braces, just something to consider.
Thank you. This was a new initiative, I believe, for Canterbury. We approached our colleagues within the sector, and this was something that we took the initiative of, and it's obviously something that we'll continue to build on. We're very excited about the results that we have achieved, so yes, that's something that we'll look forward.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Very good. Okay, any further comments, questions at all on the health and safety report? You happy to move that we receive the report? Someone like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Ward. Those in favour? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay. 9.7, the Treasury report from Bancorp Treasury Services. We have not asked Bancorp to be in attendance today. You may recall we agreed that we would have them come twice a year now rather than to every meeting. So every other meeting we'll be taking their report as read, and then we'll have them in the room. Ironically, this time, given the global events and the uncertainty and the markets being all over the place, it possibly could have been useful to have a conversation with them. However, they would simply be telling you what all the other advisors are telling you at the moment, which is they actually don't know what's going to happen next, and so it probably wouldn't have changed much. But nonetheless, we do have a report from them, and Grant, would you like to just maybe highlight that or pull out anything that you wish the committee to be aware of?
Yeah, I had very much the same thoughts. My first note I wrote was the only certainty is uncertainty right now. Times will change. But the OCR at the moment is on hold, and we'll see where that goes. There's a review date on the 8th of April. Obviously, there'll be inflationary pressures with the war going on at the moment. But we'll see how that plays out with oil prices and everything else, right? So a bit of a wait and see, really. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I would note from the report, which is the important part, is we are compliant with all our Treasury policies. So the report is useful, if for no other reason, to confirm that our provider has confirmed that we are compliant with Treasury policies. Does anyone have any other comments then on the report itself, or while we're talking about it, anything specific around Treasury matters? Councillor Sunkel.
Trying to turn my computer on and the microphone. Page 117, the debt and cover graph with the bands in there. Could you just explain that one to me? In a sense, we've got core debt, fixed rate, and our swap rates, and just we're compliant, but just explain potential for risk there.
Giles, I'm not sure if you want to say something here, but I've explored this with my team, and I do find it really complicated, and I would like to spend time with Bancorp to understand it better, to be honest. And it's working within those red bands, but what does that mean in terms of swap rates or fixed rate debt as well? So, but Giles, you might have more.
Only to say that the policy bands are obviously the red, and you'll recall on previous occasions some of the advice from Bancorp has been that we need to look to change our mix of fixed term or short term or long or variable rates to ensure that we continue to stay within those bands. But I suspect, given that you've asked the question, Councillor Sunkel, and have been sitting around the table for quite some time, that it's probably helpful if next time that Bancorp are here, they give a refresher on exactly how those work.
thank you for that, because if you look at the bands, we're sort of inside and outside on the graphics, but we are compliant, and so I think it is worth probably a conversation. Where do we go with swaps in comparison to fixed and the volatility in the markets? I know we had that conversation last time, but again, it's probably worthy of a conversation just to understand where those red lines and those other metrics of core and swaps and things sit.
Yeah. Councillor Ward?
I got similar concerns to Councillor Sacknell, and I mean, when you look out in the marketplace and look at the potential interest rates, if you're trying to book forward for the next 3 to 5 years, I mean, they're all going up. And then also a commentary I heard last week where, by the middle of next year, the base rate could be around 4%. So that means a home loan could be, 5.5%, 6%. So there's going to be huge inflationary pressure going forward. And that's, I heard all that commentary before what's happened in the weekend. So I know it's a bit like throwing a dart into the wind at the moment.
I think, as Grant said, the only certain thing is uncertainty at the moment. We obviously regularly engage with Bancorp when we do have debts or investments coming to maturity to seek their advice, and they do look out to try and indicate where we're best to play what is ultimately an uncertain future. I just think I'd remind Council and the committee that obviously, we are compliant, but we are in a relatively positive position in terms of our balance sheet and our borrowings and the level of interest that we are charged compared to other regional councils, but also the territorial authorities who are are much more exposed to the kinds of risks that you talk about, Councillor.
Yeah, it's a good point. And again, I was particularly looking at those LGFA borrowing rates and looking at where they're putting those out. I would be interested if they ran that graph tomorrow, whether the LGFA had actually left those at the same rates. I'm not sure they would have, given the current circumstances, but it's hard to tell. I reiterate those points. I think the key point for us is, A, we are currently compliant, and B, we are in a relatively good position, I think, with our profile. What I do think, Grant, though, it's a key point is when we do ask Bancorp to come next time, firstly, we could alert them to maybe talking through that specific graph and being clear for everyone what that graph's actually trying to demonstrate, because I think that's important. And at that point, hopefully, we might have a bit more clarity around where interest rate movements might be, OCR changes, etc. But I think volatility is the key message at the moment. So the critical thing is staying compliant and then trying to monitor markets as best we can. And potentially the cover issue is one which we will be taking some advice from then on going forward around how can we try and limit some risk with some of that forward cover.
Thank you, and I'm well aware that Bancorp and yourselves and the finance team have as an active ongoing conversation, so it's not a quarterly conversation. I was just trying to understand a little more. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Yep.
Yeah, just to add to Councillor Ward's comment before, I had the same view and spoke to my team about things at the moment, the way things are changing, floating versus fixed. I think it's important to note that we do have fixed debt at the moment of 75%, say, and floating at 25%. So I think that's probably the right way around, the way things are headed. I was a bit worried that floating might be a bit high. So I think, question for Bancorp, but for me it sort of feels right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions at all on the Bancorp Treasury report? Councillor Ward?
If there's not, I'd like to move the adoption of this report.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move that we receive the report and note that we are compliant with our Treasury policy and borrowing covenants. Councillor Sunkel has seconded. Any further discussion? No, those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Carried. Okay, we are making some very good time here. What is the time? Not quite 12 o'clock. Let's get into 9.8, which is the report from the Chair, which has a number of different things in it. And as usual, the purpose of this really is just to raise matters of interest and allow people to have some discussion. It's not in itself obviously a decision paper of any description, but I did ask and work with Giles around a number of matters which I thought were useful for the committee just to pick up on. Again, happy for discussion on these points. I guess I'll take leave just to talk through some of them initially and then open for further discussion. The one around the confidence in relation to internal controls. What we've discussed and I've discussed with Giles and management is that in circumstances where there's significant change and issues, and we've talked about the risk register, we've talked about a number of moving parts at the moment in the wider sector. One of the core things is to make sure we do what we do well, and we do it best practice, and we make sure that we can stay compliant with our policies. We are confident that everything that's happening in the organisation in a BAU sense is happening as it should, and that we can get assurance that it's happening as it should. So we need to continue to make sure that as an Audit and Risk Committee, things like we've done today with policy updates, reports back from internal audit, etc., we continue to maintain those things and make sure that this organisation continues to operate effectively and efficiently and in a robust way, despite the changing environment that we may be faced with externally. So again, just really wanted to pick that up as a point for us as a committee to make sure that we are focused on making sure with management that that continues to be the case, albeit in what could be some challenging circumstances. The Chatham Islands Council update. I don't know, Giles, whether you wish to pull out anything specific as an update to this committee or for Chief Executive on anything specific in relation to the Chatham Islands. I know it's been an ongoing matter that we have been monitoring.
So, I mean, at a high level, we continue to engage with the Chatham Islands. People will be aware that they have appointed an interim Chief Executive, who is also the Chief Executive of the Enterprise Trust. Both myself and Stephanie, as the Chief Executive, have been in contact with the Chatham Islands. I have further conversations with them over the next couple of weeks. And equally, both Stephanie and myself have been in discussion with DIA around the situation there and the implications for our contract, which comes to an end on the 30th of June.
Okay, thank you. Just rest assured, it's a watching brief around the relationship there and the risks associated with it. Yeah, Councillor Lamont?
Yes, just further to your comments, Chair. I was just thinking about the reputational risk. If you could comment, it'd be great.
The reputational risk in relation to the Chatham's relationship? Yeah, I think it's best probably that, Giles, we are aware of the reputational risk. It was an ongoing discussion in relation to the whole change in the nature of our relationship, shall we say, with them. At this stage, as we've indicated, it's really a monitoring process as far as I'm aware around what are activities that are happening on the Chatham Islands and what's the implication directly for the services that we provide as a service provider to them. I'm not aware of any specific reputational risk in relation to those services, Giles.
No, I mean, and obviously we are acutely aware that the Chatham Islands is in a challenging position, and we continue to reach out on a regular basis to try and ascertain what support and to suggest types of support that they might require to transition. The key thing is being clear on what arrangements they are transitioning to, which then means that we can continue to support them. And as the committee will be aware, we're also aware that we do have staff employed on the island, which is a major and important concern and focus for us.
Yeah. I think that the point's very valid, Councillor. The whole relationship and the potential for there being some risk around that, reputational risk, is something that needs constant monitoring in the current environment there. Yeah. The other two things in the report, really just to highlight for interest, the integrity report that we did contribute to, and Audit New Zealand plan to publish some information on that, and we'll make sure that's available once it comes out. And equally, I did attend an Audit and Risk Chairs event where we had the Treasury Deputy Secretary for Budget and Fiscal Performance from Treasury provided, I thought was quite a useful report on their view of the economic data and forecasts, and so again that's just shared for information, but again feeds into the uncertainty. I wouldn't want to actually be in Treasury and be an economist at the moment because it's pretty difficult to kind of gauge where things are going. And then lastly, just picked up on the recent significant weather events. Obviously, we have had significant weather events here, and that does put a lot of strain and effort into the core service delivery. And I just really want to pick that up, that obviously from a risk point of view, we are required to keep I guess, an eye on that from an audit and risk point of view to make sure we are working with management and understanding where risks to the organisation can arise from events of that nature and the strain that, if you like, it puts on the organisation for a period, particularly with those sort of unplanned activities that now need to occur because of the significant events and the impacts that they've had. Is there any further discussion Sorry, yes, I'm going to get to that. Giles is just indicating the last thing, which is I think is a bit more of a conversation point, is in relation to the local government reforms, and I'd ask the Chief Executive, I believe, to come forward and talk to some papers you should have each on your desks, hopefully, and I will ask Stephanie to, I think, talk us through this initially, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I've just had Grant whisper in my ear that he's pleased to escape at this point. So well done. My dulcet tones, being an American accent, are nothing like his. But I wanted to speak to a few of these items in particular. There are some documents on the table. You have very large versions. I have teeny tiny ones. And I want to make some comments, but I'd really value a conversation with you all on these. As a starter, I am, as the Chief Executive, very conscious of the strategic risks that face this organization by virtue of the number and also the relative quality of the proposals of change that are before us. And for those of you who may have heard me at my State of the Region or the beginning of your speech, there were two key things that I said. Someone had written in my speech notes that it was going to be a busy year. I changed that to saying it's going to be a year like we have never seen before. We have more change coming at us than we ever have, and since we were created in 1989, and the change that was created in 1989 when local government was reformed and restructured had a 5-year lead-in time with significant national direction from senior cabinet ministers and others. That is not the case in terms of what is before us at the moment, although in the context of resource management reform, that has been ongoing for 9 years, and that too we would like to finally land because we've had 9 years of discussion and very little time for actual implementation. So in the context of this being a significant year, I also noted that we need to, as an organization, focus on two things in order to manage the strategic risks before us. One is deliver, deliver, deliver. And that is very much also the signal that you all at Audit and Risk have indicated with regard to getting your foundations right, making sure that the compliance is there, and that the money that we have taken from our good people across Canterbury is invested as you have indicated it should be through the annual plan. And we should deliver to a high quality so that our citizens know that we do that and do the work well. The other part, of course, is the change piece, and that's more of what I really want to talk about. In the two pieces you have, there are two A3s. If I look at the Providing Audit and Risk Committee with assurance in relation to external change, so in other words, this particular piece of paper, what you see before you are really three areas that we have sought to mitigate those strategic risks. And I will say up front that no matter what mitigations that we will put in place, we are going to drop some plates and some things are going to get broken. And that's because if you look at the timeline, which I will talk about in a moment, the timeline is only growing in terms of change activities. And the complete lack of alignment from a central government perspective of how these fit together is guaranteed to cause significant issues for local government across the country. I'm focused on the Canterbury Regional Council, so that helps a little bit. If I just look at that first A3, I want to talk a little bit about each of those, if you like, pieces in that wheel. The getting our foundations right, and that's the organization's ability to adapt to change over time. This has been a theme in the organization for a while, and I want to thank and recognize audit and risk members, because when you look across those particular pieces, you'll see that that is the work that you spoke about today, and you have seen some of that work unfolding, and the maturity of the organization lifting, but we need to continue to do that for all the reasons that you as members have already highlighted. I'd like to then go to the bottom left where we talk about delivering forward-looking strategy to support yourselves to understand and influence proposals. Now, this is very much in Amy Allison's, as the Director of Strategy and Planning, wheelhouse. It sits also with your Committee of Strategy and Planning. So we have both governors and a central focus from staff. I will also highlight that by virtue of the volume and pace of change that happened in the last quarter, but particularly in the last 5 weeks of 2025, we put together a rapid response team, which was led by Patrick Lindsay, my principal strategic advisor. And it was over that period of time that you, within 24 hours, 36 hours, basically had summaries and very clear risks and the like, so that you knew what the proposals were and you knew where those risks sat. Those then further informed our strategy work and the submissions that you have had before you across multiple submissions across your committees. So we continue to do the horizon scanning and certainly the council workshops and submissions, and also the strategic relationship management. Now that's a really important one. You know that we have relationship management conversations with you as to the leadership that you show, and there is also some of the strategic leadership that needs to be done at a chief executive and ELT level. So that is certainly ongoing. The second or the third piece of that diagram is the coordinated organizational transition to ensure change is implemented effectively. What I have decided to do is to put a strategic transition unit and program together. I'm not the only chief executive in the regional sector doing this. We recognize that the combination of change that is before us will one way or another transform our organization, and we need to be ready for that. It is a process for mitigating those risks, and I will be very welcoming of conversation with regard to how we better report to audit and risk in future, and also to council and the public, because I think this is a risk for the public to be well aware of as well, and particularly our communities who continue to fund us. I'm in the process of creating the strategic transition unit and program. The intent is to have a common methodology across the organization. In other words, we already have methodologies for how we working in the line, authority, accountability, the way we do program management. The strategic unit should not be different than everything else. It should actually be the same. In many ways, what it will be is two things, an immediate triaging unit and a coordination unit. The intention is that I run that as chief executive, given the significant risks that sit within it, but also that we then have 3 directors and we commission work very clearly. If it's BAU work, then we leave the triaging system and we just let BAU continue. If there are particular matters that we have to attend to, anything from rates capping and the like, then we commission that work through the strategic transition unit, and we actually have particular directors in charge and then working its way through in terms of policy formation, implementation, and those sorts of things. The challenge around this very much is what you were speaking to before, is that there are 3 things that we're absolutely certain of: death, taxes, and uncertainty, or change. Carolyn, as a member of the committee, you asked for those triggers and thresholds. The way I see the strategic risk around local government reform is we know there's lots of change coming, and you can see those at that strategic level, but there'll be particular issues then that trigger activities. If I just look at rates capping, for instance, how will that impact on our budget? When does that impact on our long-term plan? Those become real issues for us. And rather than just folding them into our day-to-day business, it's do we have a plan and a commissioning project for how we might coordinate that change? Similarly, and quite seriously, because we don't know the answers at this point, I do not know the length of your term as councillors at the moment. There have been moots that it be continuing for the 3 years, and there are moots that it be finished sooner than that. If there was to be an intervention where I lost you as my councillors, I think it's really important to have a strategic transition unit that can grip up and see and have visibility of the kinds of actions that we need to take that had been held by you, that had been assessed by the Audit and Risk Committee, because my expectation is those would continue in some form, but we may need to transition to other things. And those are the organizational transitions which we don't yet know, but we may need to put in place. And whether that's around finance, people, For instance, mentioned redundancies before. We just don't know at this point, and we don't know the transition timeframes either. It could be 18 months, it could be 2 years, it could be shorter than that, and we have been trying to update you on that. So these are the different things that we've been doing. The intention, and I have a starter, I've worked with the ELT with regard to the strategic transition program, and my intention is to meet with those directors and start to put that in place. We, at this point, think we need 3 to 4 FTE. I will repurpose FTE that are already in the budget in terms of any vacancies, as this being a priority, and I will ensure that Council has full visibility of all of this work as we proceed. I thought it was wise, Chair, to bring that to the Audit and Risk Committee today in the context of the risks that we were speaking of and the strategic risk. I'll just move to the timeline and then I'll stop and just open up for conversation and questions, if that's all right. The timeline of the proposed legislative reforms is significant, and as I mentioned before, we continue to add to this list, so central government continues to add. The most immediate is the resource management bills that we have before us, and then asking ourselves what are the implications of those, anywhere from consents to how compliance monitoring enforcement might be delivered, and the most immediate, which will be the regional spatial plan, which needs to be delivered by a joint committee. For those who are aware of the legislation, you will know that the committee is mandated, but the councils in the region determine what that committee looks like. I will make a comment in terms of readiness. This region is less ready in that space, and I would say this is a higher risk for Canterbury than for other parts of the country. And that is because some of the other regions are already speaking about amalgamation, or they have, through their mayoral forums, a smaller number of territorial authorities. So we have 10, some only have 3. It is much harder to align 10 and the regional council being 11. So the ability to get a joint committee through 11 councils' approval, that in and of itself is a significant time frame issue, let alone if 11 councils cannot agree to what that joint committee should look like. Now, those conversations have started within the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, but until they are sufficiently, I'll call them ripe, I can't bring very much more to this council. But what I will do is come to this council and say, what do you think the joint committee should look like, and have options. That is my number one risk at the moment. I'll also highlight that the RM system change, the 2 bills that we have which will become acts, if you see them as vessels, the content is really the national direction. And there are really 3 tranches of national direction, or the national policy statements. And the very first tranche relates to infrastructure and natural hazards. I will note that when we were at the regional sector group, which is all the unitary and regional councils that come together, as the chairs and mayors were going through their updates for the last quarter, every single one of them mentioned issues and risks related to climate change, whether that was biosecurity incursions, severe weather events, and we have had more declarations of emergency in the first 3 months of this year than we did in all of last year. So in that context, the reality is that being able to not only prepare as a council, but to be able to prepare future policies and frameworks will be a focus of everyone over the next little while. And so that hazards and infrastructure is critical. I note the second tranche in terms of cabinet decisions, that will be on environmental standards and primary sector infrastructure. Those environmental standards are very important to us as a regional council by virtue of the fact that we have to set the environmental limits through those bills, as you know. And then lastly, tranche 3 of the national direction focuses on freshwater management and the National Environmental Standard Framework. And we know how significant freshwater management is for Canterbury. That has been our focus for over a decade now, and indeed has been the focus of the country. So until we have the actual knowledge of what sits within these national directions, we cannot populate the policy, if you like, as well as we could. I'm not going to go through the rest of this other than to note that every single one of these touches upon us and our functions in some way. And I will note that we have a central government election in November, and we obviously have another local government election in 2028. There are other risks here I'm not going to attend to, but Chair, I'll leave it at that for further conversation on any matters I've put before you.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and that's a very, very good update. Thank you. I think then the documents that you've been presented with are very clear. I like the first page. I think makes it clear, as you talked about, around both the BAU and the importance of that, but also the work you've done around establishing a unit to try and address these issues as they come at us with short notice often and with significant implication, and that can be hard to deal with, which is great. And I appreciate the timeline as well. What I was going to suggest going forward is I think the significance of these reforms are such they should become a standing agenda item now on the Audit and Risk Committee going forward. So rather than sitting in this Chair's report, I would expect we will have them as a standing agenda item, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Support that.
Thank you. Happy to take comments. I know this is a big topic, but I'm happy to take some comments. Councillor Lamont.
I just have a question, Stephanie, around the I really like this. The standing up that strategy support makes complete sense. I'm interested in your views around the engagement with strategy and policy, and how that intertwines, or is it alongside? Yep.
Sorry. Superb question, and that's exactly my intention. What I wish to do is to make sure that we report through to Strategy and Planning Committee on a regular basis, but also to take what the Strategy and Planning Committee identify as risks and priorities and fold them into the commissioning of the Strategic Transition Unit. That way we are aligned as one. That is my intention. We haven't finalised any of this, so the intention is to share that with you, Councillor, and to get that feedback and work in tandem.
Thank you. Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. That's my question. And I guess just to further delve into it, there are probably disparate views as governors as to what the future might look like, as there probably will be within the organisational side. So I'm not sure in my mind, do governors drive this conversation of what the future looks like, or does the organisation drive the conversation? Yes, we've talked about the coming together, but there's just a question in how that does actually come together and I've got no predetermined ideas. I've listened to the Merrill Forum going, well, we won't involve Environment Canterbury in the transition or the reorganisation because everyone has a vested interest, so therefore we will do the process. I'm just interested in those steps of that strategy of who's driving, and I don't know.
I'd love to know who's driving what at the moment. It's a great question, Councillor Sunkel. In terms of the simplifying local government piece, in my view, that is governance that drives that. This is very much about the structure and future of where elected members and councils reside. But in order for councillors to do that well, you need options from your officers with regard to what could they look like, what are the risks, and so I would hope that we worked in tandem that way. Councillors from the last triennium know that we worked very hard to put potential scenarios before you, and you discussed what those scenarios were, and you decided which ones would have priority, not staff. But what we did do was be able to provide you with a workshop setting and be able to provide you with the information. That would be my expectation in that space. But I will need to say, Councillor Sunkel, as the Chief Executive, I have a responsibility for this organisation. And should my elected members be removed, I will still have that responsibility and have to report to someone else, whoever that is. And so in that context, I also see us as officers needing to prepare some things. And we should do it with full visibility of council, absolutely. But I do think from that operational anticipatory perspective, that is something that officers need to be doing. I hope that helps.
Look, it does, and the first piece, the graph of the foundations, absolutely. The green piece of coordinating what it might look like, absolutely. I'm just still not clear in my mind of just that the strategy piece in the interim. But I thank you for your thoughts, and I probably concur with them.
If I might, Chair, just one other comment. I have consistently said, as any changes come, as long as the law is the law and you are my governors, that stands in terms of my responsibilities to you and your Chief Executive.
Thank you. Councillor Moody and then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I'm looking at what you've said and trying to get my head around our overall strategy, because I trust your wisdom on these matters, but it doesn't really match my thinking, and so I'm thinking, what am I missing? I'm hearing that I'm getting the impression the organisation's putting a lot of energy into the future. We're being restructured, and we're trying to influence that future through all of our efforts, and get ready for transition if we need to. If it was me, I'd probably be flipping it. I'd probably be putting a minority of energy on the future and a majority on the present, because I think the present is where we have the opportunity to make a difference, and there'll always be some sort of an organisation managing these things, and whoever it is needs to be working in the present where they can make a difference, not in the future where, and I guess, are we having much influence? Well, that's an open question, but yeah, what's your, what am I missing? Why are we putting all this energy on the future and readiness and change and influence when it's being done to us, and we could put that energy better into fixing things in the now while we're in the seat?
I'll have a go at a couple of these, your questions. In the first instance, the message I have given to staff on deliver is still the majority of the work that we do. We have a lot of work to do, and that is in your regional delivery committee, and you see that on a regular basis. So please don't see me resiling from that at all. Rather, what I'm talking about in terms of the strategic transition unit is having a small, focused, and process-oriented approach to all of the changes that are coming at us, so that I am not distracting the vast majority of staff and delivery, but rather focused on the coordination, the triaging, the coordination, and the delivery, ultimately, of those strategic changes. The reason that I think the future is important is because the future is right now, actually. The RM reforms fundamentally suggest some changes to this organization that need to be attended to. And indeed, there's quite a lot in terms of the things I've just talked about, that if we're not prepared, we will have ministerial interventions, because those are written into the draft bills. The second comment I'd make is, if we're not strategically prepared for the next steps, then no matter what we're doing today, we will very much fail. And so this is about that as well. In terms of the advocacy and the change around the simplifying local government, that is a political process, and the extent to which you are or are not heard varies depending on the day, the moment, the room. But I would have to say, if I were to make comment, is the tenor of the conversation that we had when Simplifying Local Government was released last year, compared to the greater focus and interest about what could happen next, I think we have moved it significantly. At the end of the day, I have to recognize that Cabinet has its prerogative of its own decision-making powers, and then we will need to follow through. But I do think that we have had some impact.
Okay, well, thank you for the insights, and I'm heartened to hear that perhaps by putting separately a team to work on the future, it frees up the majority to work on the present. So, yeah, kia ora.
Okay, thank you. Look, I'm just conscious understanding orders. We have approximately 5 minutes before we do need to break for lunch. Happy to take any further questions now if you think they can be answered within that time frame. Otherwise, happy to adjourn. Okay, Councillor Robinson.
No, just a quick comment. I thank you for this dashboard. It works with my mind very well. With regards to updating council policy suite, I'm assuming it's all the ones, like local government statement and all that, all of that stuff. Okay, that's cool. Are we going to relook at the policy statement at any point, like the regional policy statement, or at least some of the inputs within that to address some of these things on the dashboard within that policy?
So you're referring to the regional policy statement under the current RMA, Councillor? So councillors will be aware that the regional policy statement will no longer exist. The work that we've done in the past, which has been parked, if you like, can inform the subsequent regional spatial plan and any other plans that we do. Effectively, our RPS as it is currently stays in place until those regional spatial plans are triggered, if you like. Once we complete them, and the intention from government is within 2 years. So remembering the regional spatial plan needs to be delivered within 15 months, actually, of the bills being gazetted into law.
With that in mind, thank you for reiterating that, and that's probably what I was referring to. I guess with any emerging sort of risks, be it environmental or the likes, how do we triage these and prioritise them and utilise the current policies we've got in place to actually look at those in the absence of being able to address any future new policies?
That will be part of the work of the strategic transition team, to be able to identify where are we now, where do we need to go next, and then what could we put in place. Just bearing in mind that the joint committee, the Regional Spatial Plan Joint Committee, will ultimately be tasked with quite a lot of that, and the question of what a joint committee looks like and its membership is therefore paramount.
Thank you. Look, I'm just conscious of time. I'm very happy to move. If people have more substantive questions on this, I sort of gauge if people have a lot more discussion on it, because otherwise we'll break for lunch and then come back to it. Or if it's only a couple of questions, I'm happy that we could just extend for those questions. Just want to give a gauge in the room. You've got a quick one, Carolyn. You. Okay. Well, we'll try and keep within time. Go, Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. As I understand it, the regional council, in whatever form it is, will develop the environment plan. Who signs that plan off at the end of the day? Because that then fits into the spatial plan. So who signs that plan off at the end of the day?
All things being equal and as they are today, we would. However, we don't have alignment between the simplifying local government when we don't have clarity about the role of a regional government into the future. And so that is still an open question, and that is why the Strategic Transition Unit will be critical. It's about creating pathways as we work our way through these things.
Thank you. So just my question in my mind is we could write an environment plan that then transitions in, and the mayors of the committee goes, no, we don't like that, and want to rewrite. So just time and effort and things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this, Stephanie. I think my comment is really just to commend the thinking that underpins this. I think the nature of the challenge that the organisation and the governors face is that classic one of change, where one is dealing with two concurrent but competing realities. And I think this quite helpfully sets out the structural approach to the way in which one continues to deal with those things which are still within your, not just your control, but your responsibility and obligations at a legislative level, but provides a mechanism by which you are able to manage contingencies for the various forms. And I liked your comment before about the legality of the legal framework. Obviously, such things appeal to me, but it's always useful in a state of change of this scale and magnitude to keep referencing those things that don't change. And at any one time, it will be possible to identify who the lawful decision makers are for any decision that is in front of you. And I'm old enough to remember Fitzgerald and Muldoon, where one cannot change the law just because one anticipates that it's going to be changed. One must continue to comply with the law such as it is. So in a world of continuing uncertainty, there are some fixed points of reference. And I like the framework this gives of being able to navigate and understand at any one point in time what's the nature of the decision that you're being asked to make, what's the legal framework that governs that, and what does that tell you about who makes that decision and how. And I like the fluidity that this provides. So I think this is a really valuable tool that provides governors and staff alike with a roadmap to understand that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And it is that sense of, as governors, grappling with the reality that we have two concurrent but competing realities. We have a continuing obligation as defined by the status quo, and within that we have a responsibility to manage constructively and actively for whatever the future might be. I particularly like the focus on the housekeeping, because when the change is crystallised and one knows what it is, there will be a backlog of substantive business to be done. So if you are able to present whoever the new governors are with assurance that this is a well-run, tidy shop, and so you don't have to worry about all of those things which are important but can become easy distractions, and here's the substantive issues that your new legal responsibilities require you to focus on, and here's how we've cleared the runway, so that's what you can start to do from the beginning. So I really like this, and I can see it being a useful tool that will help you and the governors navigate through what one can only say will be an interesting time.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just conscious of time. We do need to adjourn, please, for lunch at this point. So I will adjourn the meeting and we'll start again at... we might wait and put the motion when we come back, just in case there's further discussion. Thank you. So meeting will be adjourned. We'll start back at 1 p.m. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Just before we move to the next agenda item, I just want to check if there is any further discussion at all on the last matter that we discussed in the Chair's update. No one's thought about anything over lunch they want to add? Okay, thank you. Well, that being the case, then I will just move that we receive the report from the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and the matters that were discussed. Do I have someone second that? Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Those in favour? All right. Thank you. Carried. Okay, we'll now move a resolution to go into public excluded. The recommendation is, let me move to it. Are you good? Okay, I move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings, namely the items that are listed in the agenda in relation to the legal update, and that Robin Fitchett, General Counsel, remain after the public has been excluded for items that are in the agenda. And also Philip Moore, who is online. Do I have someone second that, please? Thank you, Councillor Ward. Those in favour? All right. Thank you. Good. Thank you. Welcome back to open meeting. The only item to discuss at this point is the next meeting, which is scheduled to be held on the 10th of June. Everyone comfortable with that date? That being the case, I would ask Councillor Robinson to close us with a karakia.
Anuhia, anuhia. Anuhia ki te uru tapa nui o tāne. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana. Te wairua e te ara tākata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tina, tina. Homie, taikie. Taikie. I missed one word.